So we're going to talk about congruent polygons. So the first thing we're going to talk about is triangle congruence and how to match up the corresponding congruent parts. So as you see here, I've got triangle element is congruent to triangle HIJ, and we're going to just say what the corresponding congruent parts are. So when we're talking about triangles, we've got three sides, we've got three angles. So we're going to write those corresponding congruent statements. If you look here, I have them in letters, so that can kind of help you with how to label them because you want to make sure that you're going in the correct order. So for the first part, we are going to do LM for the side is going to be congruent to HI. The next side would be MN, and that's going to be congruent to IJ. And again, you're noticing I'm going in the colored order. So we normally say with segments it doesn't matter each direction, but when we're talking about triangles being congruent, the order does matter for these. So lastly, we will have LN, and that will be congruent to HJ. And then the angles are pretty simple. We're just going to add or match up the angles. So we've got angle L is going to be congruent to angle H, angle M is congruent to angle I, and angle N is congruent to angle J. So we're just going to complete the congruent statements here based on the triangles. So the first one, it says triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So that's going to mean angle A is going to match with angle D, angle F matches with angle C, angle ABC has to follow the order, so it matches with DEF, angle FDE, again, following the order. So F was last, first, and then the middle. So if we follow the order, we're going to go CAB. AB matches with DF, DE. FE matches with CB. And DF matches with AC. So we can use congruent statements to find missing parts of a triangle, because if something is congruent, it's also equal. So if we look at the statement here, this says triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So it asks for AB. So I first want to figure out what does AB match with in the other triangle. AB matches with DE. So if DE is 45, then since those sides are congruent, AB also has to be 45. Angle C matches with angle F. So if angle F is 20, angle C also has to be 20. So we're going to use the congruent statements to just set up equations to solve. So it says find the measures of the angles or length of the side. So it says triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So we have angle A is congruent to angle D. So I'm going to set those equal to each other since they are congruent. So if I solve for x, I get 4x equals 6. So I get x equals 6 over 4 or 3 over 2 if we reduce that. Same concept now, I'm looking at the sides. BC is going to be congruent to EF from the congruent statement. So I can set those equal to each other. So I will get 2x equals 8, so x will equal 4. So now on your graphic organizer paper, I want you to just fill in the definition of congruent triangles because we're going to use this in our proofs. So what the definition of congruent triangles is that all corresponding sides and angles are congruent. So what that means is in order for triangles to be congruent, the three corresponding angles would need to be congruent. And that's what this picture will look like. So remember, we do arc marks to show congruence. So the one arc mark would mean those angles are congruent and so on and so forth. So not only do we need the three corresponding angles congruent, we also need the three corresponding sides. And then remember, we use tick marks to show that side lengths are congruent. So we'd have to have all 6 of those in order for a triangle to be congruent. Then we have one theorem that we're going to throw in this chapter. So that is the third angles theorem. So what that theorem says is that the third angle is if you have two triangles, The third angle theorem states that if two angles in one triangle are congruent to two angles in another triangle, then the third pair of angles must also be congruent. So we're going to look at an example of a proof here. So we're given a lot of information, and we're trying to find that triangle STV is congruent to triangle UTV. So with that being said, again, the only way triangles can be congruent is if we have three angles congruent and we have three sides congruent that are corresponding. So once we have all of that, then we can say that the triangles are congruent. So for part one, it says SV is congruent to UV and ST is congruent to UT. And those are both given. So I'm just going to put a little S here. So I know I have two sides that are congruent, and I have to know where I'm going because, again, I have to get all six. So I'm looking for three S's and three A's. So the next step says TV is congruent to TV, and that is a reflexive property because it's congruent to itself. It's the same line. So now I have three corresponding sides. I still can't say that the triangles are congruent because I don't have all three corresponding angles congruent. So the next step says S and U are right angles, and that is also given. And then we can say that angle S is congruent to angle U. That's right angles theorem, or we've been saying all right angles are congruent. So now I have one pair of angles that are congruent. The next step says SVW is congruent to UVW, and that's given. So that's my second angle. So still can't say that the triangles are congruent because I don't have three angles yet. So now I can say that SVW and SVT are supplementary, and UVW and UVT are supplementary. Now that's from my picture. If we look at it, we've got a linear pair here. So if those angles are congruent to each other from step 5, and then we're saying that they're supplementary, then we can use congruent supplements theorem to say that angle SVT is congruent to angle UVT. And right there I've got my third angle. So again, I have three sides that I said were congruent, and now I have three angles that are congruent. So, and then we have angle STV is congruent to angle UTV. So that's going to be because of the third angles theorem. So if I have three angles, two angles congruent to each other, then I can say that the third angle is congruent to each other. And now that we have our 6 parts, we can say that triangle STV is congruent to triangle UTV. Anytime you're saying that the triangles are congruent, your reasoning is definition of congruent triangles when we have all 6 parts.